Students are continuing to write their Patriot Pen essay competition for the local Veterans of Foreign War organization. In today's focus, we're going to think a lot about the introduction to our essays. When you're writing a multi-paragraph essay, the introduction can be one of the most challenging pieces. First, we don't do it as often. It's different from a body paragraph, which is really similar to the ordinary short answers that we write in most class periods. Second, introductions tend to be a little more unique to each writing, and they don't follow necessarily an exact formula. Instead, you need to remember that your goal is to introduce your audience to the topic. You're focusing more on the question than you are on the answer. That's hard for many students who tend to make one of these three big mistakes. They start right away by rewriting the question or naming the exact answer. They go into their big ideas immediately, and then they find they have nothing else to say before they start describing them. And so they automatically jump right into their details. And that's not the goal. The goal instead is to provide some type of attention grabber to pull your audience in, to use background information and descriptive language to give them the context so they see how this fits into the big picture, and only at the very end of the introduction to put your thesis statement or your claim. Those are like your super-powered topic sentence that will show the ideas for the whole essay, and it's where you're naming your ideas but not yet explaining them. The key is to remember that those only come at the very end of the paragraph. You should have a few sentences first that give that very important background. I like to give the metaphor of comparing this to asking somebody out on a date. Imagine that there's a new student at the middle school and you're interested in asking him or her out. You wouldn't want to walk up to them for the very first time and immediately blurt out, "Go out with me." That's not a winning strategy. Instead, you'd probably start with a couple of jokes. You'd get to know them. You'd let them get to know you. You'd warm the waters a little bit, and then you'd ask them out. We need to do the same thing with our essays. You don't just want to immediately jump in and say, "America inspires me because of blah, blah, and blah." First, you want to get your audience into that topic, maybe by looking at some big ideas to begin with. That's one of the most common strategies that we see students using. Starting with some really big ideas and then gradually narrowing your audience to the specific prompt that we're going to be addressing. Sometimes I tell students to think about it like they were cooking a meal, that it's easiest to get all of their ingredients out in front of them, pick one of those ingredients that they want to deal with first, and then slowly layer in the other pieces. So if I peel this prompt apart, some of the ingredients that stand out the most are America, inspiration, and even myself, because the prompt is asking about you or young people, students. Implied in the prompt are some other ideas like what we're caring about in the future or the fact that our audience is veterans and we've emphasized that that's really important. What a writer might do is pick one or two of those ingredients and gradually introduce them with some attention-grabbing language and description. So, for example, you might start with the idea of inspiration, that people can be inspired to take great actions into the future. You might give some examples from history of people who have been inspired to do incredible things. Then you might take the next step and introduce your ingredient about America and explain that the ideals of America have inspired people throughout history, and perhaps give one or two examples of that. And finally, then you end with your specific thesis statement, the ways that America inspires you, and you name those ways without yet describing them. Let's look at an example with a different prompt. So imagine that I am applying to be a principal at the middle school. And one of the questions that they asked me in my application is what made me want to apply. This is actually a pretty common question. So I might start by pulling out some big ideas. So it can be about me, or about middle school, about New Oxford. I'm going to choose some of these. First I brainstorm, then I pick. Let's imagine I'm going to start first with middle school. What should I think about middle schools and their students? Then I'm going to link to leadership before I name my actual central idea. So I might start by pointing out that middle school is very difficult for young people, scary, confusing, and overwhelming. I'm using these emotions to capture my audience's attention. In their head, they're probably thinking for themselves about whether they believe middle school is difficult and what they've experienced as far as tough times. What we want to do is get our audience related to our topic by focusing on a big idea. Then I link in to students and what I have to say about them. And I link that to the importance of leadership because eventually we want to be talking about being a principal. And then I give my specific answer about myself, that I have the leadership skills needed to be a principal who creates nurturing middle school environment for our students. And perhaps I could even name 2 or 3 leadership skills that would really make me stand out. Maybe I would say organization and communication. You can put those ideas in there, but you shouldn't start describing them yet. You save that for your body paragraphs. At this stage, students should be ready to finish their body paragraphs in the template on Schoology. Then you can go back and add your introduction to the beginning of your essay. Once you're done, if you have time, proofread your writing to look for conventions and style. You can ask one of your teachers for a checklist that will help you do that. And at the end, you want to look carefully at your specific word count. Remember that the overall goal of this essay is for it to land between 300 and 400 words. That can be tricky as we get closer to the finish point. It's also good practice, though, for some future writings you'll do. Like if you are applying for a college, they often put specific word counts into those requirements. And so one of the goals of the Patriot Pen is to continue practicing different types of writings.